He is the senior writer at Dave Campbell's Texas Football Magazine, doing an incredible job of covering college football coast to, border to border here in the great state, top to bottom. He's all over it. He's our man, Mike Craven. He's also my co-host on the Eyes on Texas multicast, which we will have out tomorrow. We'll record our newest episode coming up today. What's up, Mr. Craven?
Nothing much. Nobody got fired between the time I went to bed last night and the time I woke up, so it was pretty good.
Pretty good. Yeah, you've had a busy couple days. I mean, you knew this was coming with the carousel, and you were in Waco yesterday, you told me. Then you had to travel down to College Station, which isn't that far of a drive, to cover the Mike Elko press conference. Let me start with what you learned in Waco, and then we'll get to the Aggies and the Longhorns in the championship game. But what'd you make of what's going on in Waco? Dave Aranda will stay. 3-9 campaign, but massive changes coming to how they run the operation, it feels like.
Yeah, I think he's going to go back to being defensive coordinator, Dave Aranda, where he's calling the plays, where he's coaching the schemes, where he's in those meetings all of the time. And they're going to look for an offensive coordinator with an explosive offense, but also one that's had some head coaching experience. And this isn't a unique thing. There's plenty of colleges around the country where there's basically a head coach for the offense and a head coach for the defense. It feels like they're going to go that way. And another big part of it is they're going to get into NIL a little bit more. Baylor, a small Christian university, I don't think that they wanted to get into the waters of NIL too much. But you look around, even in the Big 12 without Oklahoma, there's still plenty of places in there spending a decent amount of money on players. And if Baylor wants to keep up, they're going to have to get into that pool. I think they realize that. So those are the changes that we're going to see in Waco.
All right. So we'll watch for names of a dynamic offensive coordinator with head coaching experience. There are those guys are out there for sure. But Dave Aranda, Mac Rhodes, the AD there, you still feel like they're confident in Dave Aranda. He won a Big 12 championship in his second year, but a fall without Matt Rule's players and Joey McGuire moving on. To Texas Tech and take a lot of that recruiting staff. There's still confidence in Aranda in Waco?
I think so. And, you talk to Dave, you like him. You want to like him. You want him to succeed. And I think, watching what happened with Dana Holgorsen at Houston versus what happened with Dave Aranda at Baylor is likability and the ability of bosses to go, well, I like this guy coming to work. I like working with this guy. I want him to do better. Let's see if he can have one more year. Another part of it's the money. I think A&M buying out Jimbo for $76 million warps our brain into thinking that's not a ton of money, and all of these colleges have $20, $30, $40 million laying around to go buy out a coach. Dave Aranda's at a private school, so we don't know the exact number, but I'm told it's around $20 million. They just finished their development center or finishing up their player development center. They just built a new basketball arena. They finished an indoor practice facility. Like, they've done a lot right in the last year or so at Baylor. And I just don't think their donor base was up to, hey, let's get another $20 million raised and then another $10 million for the next coaching search. I think they're going to try to get Aranda back in his comfort zone of being the defensive coordinator, try to bring in a guy who's been a head coach to run the offense, and then they're going to reassess after the 2024 season and see where Baylor's at.
Mike Craven, Dave Campbell's Texas football senior writer, went from Waco, where he got that news. Dave Aranda still liked by his bosses. Safe to say at Aggieland, Jimbo Fisher wasn't very liked by a lot of people. And that's where the $80 million buyout comes, and now the move to Mike Elko. Just your thoughts, Mike. Obviously, we all heard and saw the reports that Mark Stoops was the choice, and maybe flew to College Station and was told to go back because of fan and regent and booster backlash at the hire. And now Mike Elko is in. What was the scene there yesterday? Uncomfortable? What was your read of what went on over the weekend and what was announced yesterday?
No, I think everything was fine, and they were having a good time yesterday. General Welsh, who's their interim president, probably going to become the president at Texas A&M shortly, kind of made a joke at the very beginning, kind of saying the quiet part out loud. And he goes, turns out hiring a big-time college football coach is hard. And it can be, right? There's a lot that goes into this thing. There's a lot of opinions in the room. I think we act like Steve Sarkisian was the one and only choice for Texas, and everybody that was in that room bet on Steve Sarkisian. That's not how it goes, right? Like, there's differing of opinions. There's 10 or 15 power brokers making these decisions, and they're not all going to agree. And also, they're all used to being told yes. Like, not many of them are used to being told no. Like, they get what they want all of the time. And so I think with A&M, they still have a problem with leaks, right? All that stuff kind of goes on, I think, in a lot of coaching searches, but we don't ever hear about it. The fact that we heard about it is probably a bad sign. But Mike Elko checks every single box that they wanted. You know, they looked around at the SEC and they see Nick Saban and Kirby Smart as the two top dogs. Well, those guys are defensive coaches. And so I think they wanted to go back to their roots, get a defensive coach. When Mike Elko was at A&M, they were 34-12 under Jimbo Fisher. When he wasn't there, they were 12-12 under Jimbo Fisher. I think they see Elko as like the glue guy, as the program guy, as the blue collar dude. And I think with Texas coming into the conference, that's the mentality and that's the perception that they want there at A&M. So I think it was a good hire. I just think the way that they got to the hire makes it look like maybe it wasn't as good of a hire.
As usually you do, Mike. You put it in great perspective. Yeah, there's a lot of people with opinions, and if the Stoop stuff doesn't get leaked, maybe he was just flying in for an interview to finalize, but somebody wanted that out, and it really led to the backlash, which led to Mike Elko, which may in the end be the right hire anyhow. Pretty clear for Mike Elko that he can coach defense. I don't think there's any doubt about that. He knows most of that locker room, that he still has a ton of talent on the defensive side. His ceiling and his fortune there is going to be predicated on the staff he hires and the offensive coordinator he hires from this point.
Yeah, no doubt. It'll be interesting to see if he brings in Johns from Duke, who's a good young offensive coordinator that a lot of people like, or if he goes outside. I mean, he's got a budget. I mean, they handed that to A&M's credit. They handed us his contract info as soon as the press conference started. I mean, the whole thing. His 6-year, $7 million base salary, what the incentives were. He can make up to $10.5 million. And then the other part was the assistant salary pool. He has an $11 million assistant salary pool. And so he's going to be able to go get whatever offensive coordinator he wants probably, or at least most of them. And so it'll be interesting if he stays with guys he knows, or if he goes out and gets kind of a big name splash OC to lead this thing. And then you're right about the familiarity. He talked about how it's rare for your first team meeting for you to know half the roster. And I think that's one of the reasons that he was hired. 2024 is a big year for A&M. They had a 12-year start on Texas. They're now in the same conference. They're hosting that game on November 30th. They don't want to get embarrassed. And to have a guy come in and to keep most of that roster intact gives them the best chance to compete with Texas and compete in the SEC in 2024. I think that was a big part of why he was hired as well.
What about Ross Bjork? I mean, there's some talk that it wasn't his guy and got overruled. And what's your thought on Ross Bjork and his standing now at the top of the athletic department there at A&M?
Yeah, that one's going to be interesting. They've had a lot of turnover. Ross talked about how he's had 4 different presidents in 4.5 years there at AD. I do think it's one of those things at A&M that without that surefire, condensed leadership at the top, it's allowed a lot of other parties to become pseudo leaders, like a lot of factions within that back room there at A&M, because they haven't had just a consistent president to be the guy or the gal there, to be the boss. And so I don't think he has as much power as a lot of athletic directors. And I do think that some of the Mark Stoops stuff goes back on Ross. And I think some of the contract of Jimbo goes back on Ross, right? And so this is a big hire for him. Elko needs to work out. If Elko doesn't work out quickly, I'd imagine he's on that block as well.
There's Mike Craven, senior writer, Dave Campbell's Texas Football. Before we talk some Texas and Oklahoma State and your thoughts on what's coming Saturday, your alma mater, UTSA, Jeff Traylor. He was a candidate at A&M and interviewed for that job. Houston has come open with Dana Holgorsen after a 4-8 season being relieved. Is he the natural choice there? We talked about Gary Patterson as well. I know you've written some stories on top candidates you're hearing out of the U of H.
Yeah, I mean, I think UTSA may have dodged a bullet here. Without Arkansas opening up, without Baylor opening up, A&M going more national, Jeff Traylor may be the head coach of UTSA in 2024. And that's something that I don't think I would have predicted about a month ago, just because I thought some more jobs were going to open. Houston's going to be interesting because Houston doesn't have as much money as a lot of the programs in the Big 12. And so I think Traylor's choice right now is, do you stay at UTSA and try to win the American and maybe get into the playoffs a couple of times out of every 5 years? Or do you go to Houston and where you're going to have to be under-resourced and catching up to the rest of the Big 12, and maybe 8-4, 9-3 is going to get you fired, where 8-4, 9-3 at UTSA may not be celebrated, but it'll keep you going. And so I think UTSA is going to be okay there on the Houston search, although you never know what's going to happen with coaching carousel stuff. If I'm Houston, my first call is Willie Fritz at Tulane. He was at Sam Houston. He knows the area. He knows East Texas. At Tulane, you're recruiting Houston a lot. he's just a ball coach. Like, the dude's won at like 4 or 5 different college levels. And so he would be my first call. I would absolutely call Jeff Traylor. But they'd be silly not to just kick the tires on Gary Patterson. I mean, he led TCU into the Big 12. He's kind of done that whole not having as much resources as everybody you're playing, and he loves that. He relishes that kind of work. He wants to get back into coaching. And so I imagine he gets an interview, he gets some feelers out there and see how interested he is and if they could afford him and what he thinks about NIL and the transfer portal. Because that's kind of the thing with some of these older coaches, right? You just want to know how they feel about modern football and if they're going to adapt to it, because you're not going to four-star general your way to wins anymore. You need to be more of a player coach than Gary was. It'll be interesting to see if he gets back into it, kind of how he's changed as a leader.
Yeah, and you kind of feel, I argued this yesterday, Mike, that if you get Gary Patterson, it's his last job, right? I mean, he's going to stick and stay there and help build that program like he did TCU with a fertile recruiting base, if he's willing to go, and play in the NIL space. But at the same time, you hire Willie Fritz, and he kills it at Houston, be another stepping stone spot for him because he's on the rise as is. But will be interesting because I think Gary Patterson could be there 10 more years and be your coach for quite a while. Traylor and Fritz, might be a shorter term situation for Houston. Either way, great stuff from Mike Craven. Mike, you were at the game on Friday when Texas demolished Texas Tech 57-7. As we told folks, you grew up you pretty much grew up in the Texas athletic department. Your grandfather was the longtime team doctor there, Dr. Craven. And so you've been to a lot of football games there. I've heard from a lot of people that was as good a game experience and game electricity that maybe we've ever seen at DKR. What was your read on the game, and then what you experienced in the building?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to disagree with that. I had gone to the Kansas game earlier in the year, but it was during the day. Like, there's just with the drones and the light show and the LED and everything. That was amazing that was the Friday after Thanksgiving. Like, I've probably gone to 150 Texas games in my life, and that's got to be top 5 experience that I've ever seen. What Del Conte and that group has done behind the scenes with Bevo Boulevard and having Bob Schneider at Texas City Limits, like, it was a packed house. I remember when Matt got there and the whole come early, be loud, stay late thing. That was a plea. That was like, please do that, because y'all don't do that. Please come early, stay loud, be late. And now you don't have to have that rallying cry anymore. And I think Texas is SEC ready on the football field, and after what I saw Friday against Texas Tech, they're SEC ready in the stands, and that's going to be a big part of the success over the next year or two.
Yeah, we talked about that yesterday. That was the vision. CDC said when he got here, and people were talking, well, why are you doing all this when the team's no good? Let's get the team good. He was like, no, my job is to make the experience a great one. We want to look like Austin. We want to be like Austin. We want it to be a celebration of Texas football. And then it's Sark's job to coach the team. And he's done a heck of a job of building the roster. And now it's really come together. And I think that Friday night was kind of a culmination of both of those visions. And, maybe a signing post for where it's headed, big picture. What about the game Saturday? Now, Longhorns are a 2-touchdown favorite. Oklahoma State has gone 7-1 in their last 8. Not always pretty, but Mike Gundy can flat coach. What's your level of concern for the Longhorns on Saturday to get a championship?
Yeah, I wasn't that concerned about Texas Tech because it felt like the thing Texas Tech did the best was the thing Texas was best at stopping, and I feel like this Oklahoma State game is essentially the same thing. Ollie Gordon's great. I've been watching Ollie Gordon play football for 3 or 4 years. He was awesome in the DFW area at South Grand Prairie. I was actually watching an Ollie Gordon playoff game against Allen when Sark's news got announced that he was going to be the Texas coach. That was that year the playoffs went into the following calendar year because of COVID. He's awesome. But Texas is incredible on the defensive line front. I mean, Tavondre Sweat, Byron Murphy, you're not going to run against those guys successfully. Like, if your key to victory is running through Tavondre Sweat and Byron Murphy, you ain't winning. And I just don't see how Oklahoma State passes the ball enough to outscore Texas without the run game. Mike Gundy said in his press conference, in his career, he had been very good when he's one-dimensional, and they're going to have to figure out a way to run the football. I know Tech was able to put up some numbers, but at no point during that game were they controlling it with the run game. If Texas gets a lead like they did against Oklahoma State, like they did against Tech, I just don't see the Cowboys built in a way to really push Texas. I think this was a better matchup than, say, a rematch with Oklahoma or another team with maybe a more passing-centric identity. They match. Styles make fights, and this style matches up really well for Texas.
Yeah, that's well said. And had it been Oklahoma and Dylan Gabriel and the ability to run and play that spread veer and really get after Texas, which they did in the Cotton Bowl, you'd be a little more concerned. But at the same time, it's Mike Gundy, 7-3 in the last 10 against Texas, and always has something up his sleeve. So we look forward to that game. Mike, real quick, while you were at the game and you talk about top 5 experience, what about when Arch Manning came in the game? That was pretty surreal. This is a third-string quarterback, only came in because Malik Murphy got run into on the sidelines on a kickoff and banged up his shoulder. So Arch is in the game. That was. What a hero's welcome he received. That was pretty cool.
Yeah, to take everybody behind the curtain, when a game is a blowout like that, all of us up in the press box are writing our stories. Like, we're getting a head start, we're writing our stories. So most of our heads were down looking at our computer, and then all of a sudden the crowd went crazy as if something – I didn't know if McConaughey had taken his shirt off or what was going on. Like, the crowd was going insane. And you look up and you see Arches out there, and we all stop writing our story, right? We just watch the rest of the game, because you don't know what's going to happen. And it's just like such a thing we've all thought about for so long and written so many words about that you just went there and you watched it. It was awesome to see the crowd stick around and then the crowd have that type of reaction. And you get reminded what the Manning name and what the lore and the pressure that kid must be under. It was something. It was something to see a game be a blowout and then a kid who you've never seen play before at the college level come out and then captivate the entire stadium and the entire press box. It's just something about that last name.
Yeah, and you said it. You guys had your head down. Fans were leaving, and all of a sudden Arch is in. Everybody came back, and the place was packed all the way until the end, which really, culminated a great night for Texas. And see if they can finish it off with a great game Saturday. Thank you, Mike. I'll see you later, and we'll be recording the Eyes on Texas podcast for our episode this week. A lot of the same conversation, but even deeper dives. We appreciate you, my friend. Thanks a lot.
All right, talk to you later.
All right, there's Mike Craven. Good stuff on all things Texas A&M, Baylor, Texas. Likes the Longhorns. Styles make fights, and this one does seem to fit Texas, much like Texas Tech.